The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. The pound under pressure following disappointing UK retail sales figures. Beijing takes a swipe at US-led technology restrictions, imposing import-export curbs on the graphite used in electric car batteries. Plus, the fashion designer Anya Hindmarsh regains control of the luxury excess businesses that bears her name. Good morning, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. Good afternoon, even. It's been a long week. The pound has fallen to a 5-month low against the euro, and it remains close to its recent 7-month low against the US dollar, as weak retail sales figures raise concerns for the sector in the run-up to Christmas. The Office for National Statistics said retail sales volumes in September were down 0.9% on August. That came off the back of a 0.4% month-on-month rise from July to August. Meanwhile, the Office for National Statistics said today that public sector net borrowing came in at £14.3 billion in September. That was lower than the £20.5 billion forecast by the Office for Budget Responsibility. It means that during the first half of the financial year, the government borrowed £1.7 billion, up £15.3 billion on the same 6 months last year, but some £19.8 billion less than the OBR forecast in March last year. Here's how the pound's doing at the moment. As you can see, it's little changed against either the dollar or the euro, but it's been plumbing depths against both over the course of the day. Well, joining me now is Yo Selfin. She's Chief Economist at KPMG. Yo, good to see you this afternoon. There's been a lot of suggestions that this weakness was down to warm weather in September. Is it just that, or is the cost of living crisis biting as well, all these interest rate rises?
It's probably both. So we did have warmer weather, and that would have impacted some of the purchases. But we probably have weaker consumer spending trend passing through, and that is a result of, as you say, the squeeze on household purchasing income and the rising interest rates that are taking their toll.
Could it be that people are putting money aside for Christmas and not spending now?
Well, based on the surveys that we've seen, they're actually planning to spend less on Christmas this year. So it is probably not that necessarily. And also, when you look at the trend of the pattern of spending, it's the bigger items that are being affected. So I'd say we wouldn't probably at this stage expect a relatively strong Christmas spending season at this stage.
What I find baffling, though, Yale, is that for the last 3 months running, earnings growth has outstripped the headline rate of inflation. Real wages are rising. Why is consumer spending so apparently weak?
Well, because we've got quite a lot to catch up on. So we've had real earnings falling for a while. We've still got the impact of interest rates to feed through the mortgage costs of quite a lot of borrowers. So there's still more to come, and therefore it's not surprising that we will continue feeling that impact for some time.
Now, Andrew Bailey, the Bank of England governor, has given an interview to the Belfast Telegraph today in which he's said that there will be a marked drop in the headline rate of inflation in October, largely because the energy price cap has come down. Do you think he's hinting there that the MPC is going to sit on its hands on the 2nd of November?
Well, he's absolutely right. We weren't surprised with the fact that inflation wasn't moving in the last data that we got, and we are expecting a significant drop in October, as you say. So we're expecting inflation to fall quite significantly by December, and that is really good news. But I think that's already been factored in, and therefore we weren't expecting any interest rate rise in November, and we're still at the same point now. We're expecting flat curve for a little while.
Now, separately, of course, we had the public sector borrowing numbers today for the half year were £20 billion lower than the OBR were forecasting. I mean, some people would say that gives the Chancellor headroom for tax cuts ahead of an election. But is that figure just going to be revised away by the OBR come the autumn statement?
Well, we can definitely see some more revisions. And also one of the things to bear in mind is that when you look at the 27-28 numbers, we're expecting that number to overshoot the OBR forecast by about 30 billion. So there's, depending on how you look at it, there isn't really that much room to spare.
I see. I mean, it's interesting, though, to note that the tax take is rising year on year. Both income tax, corporation tax, VAT, they're all up year on year. I mean, is it possible that the Chancellor might look again at sort of indexing some thresholds or raising them?
A difficult call at this stage, given that we are heading into an election year and the Chancellor will have really difficult decision to make in terms of what he's doing. So I'll pass on this one.
Well, no, it's not one many people would want to answer, Yale, in fairness. Now, what about the pound today? It's at a 7-month low nearly against the US dollar. It's at a 5-month low against the euro. Of course, potentially all that means more import inflation.
Yeah, a little bit, although I don't think it will have such a major impact over all those other things in the mix. I mean, overall, we are expecting relatively weak outlook for the UK economy. In the short term, we could see a contraction in output in Q3. That is definitely on the card. There's a lot of talk on recession. We don't think there will be a recession in the second half of this year, but there's a lot of talk of that, and that obviously doesn't help the pound.
Worth noting that a lot of central banks around the world have been intervening this week against the US dollar. I mean, the Reserve Bank of India has been selling dollars, the Riksbank in Sweden, the Indonesian Central Bank. I mean, clearly there is a lot of incipient sort of dollar strength out there.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not probably what you would expect from the Bank of England, but there's definitely more action being taken, as you noted. I think generally what we've seen also with the tensions in the Middle East, we may see more of flight to safety, if you like. So that may be one of the things that is pushing the dollar stronger.
OK, yeah, we have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some other business news stories for you now. And the fashion designer Anya Hindmarch has regained control of the luxury accessories business that bears her name. The Financial Times, citing filings at Companies House, said Ms Hindmarch became the ultimate controlling party of the business in April this year. She had sold a 39% stake to the Qatari investor Mehula in 2012 and a further 21% 2 years later. But she returned to running the business when Mehula sold a majority stake to Iran's Marandi family in 2019, and they remain co-owners. Shares of the car makers Ford and General Motors have risen by 2% and nearly 3% respectively this afternoon, amid speculation that the pair are moving towards a tentative deal with the United Auto Workers Union, whose members in some places have been on strike for the last 5 weeks. Well, it comes ahead of an expected statement later today from Sean Fain, the union's president, who has been pushing for big pay increases and a restoration of previous pension rights. The union also wants the car makers to allow it to be represented at future electric vehicle battery plants. And Intercontinental Hotels Group said today it continues to benefit from the upsurge in travel and tourism following the end of lockdowns. The owner of the Holiday Inn and Hotel Indigo brands said that during the 3 months to the end of September, revenue per available room, which is the key industry measure, was up 10.5% on the same period last year. It was up 12.8% on the same period in 2019 before the pandemic. The shares of IHG, which during the period opened nearly 8,000 rooms across 50 hotels, have fallen by 3.75% on the absence of any new news on possible share buybacks. Well, still to come here on Business Live, we'll have a look at how the markets are doing going into this weekend. Don't go away.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Ida has certainly left its mark on New Orleans.
It just feels heartbreaking.
We help you understand the world with us.
We are standing on the supply line right into the heart
of America's opioid crisis. I've reported from around the world and around the UK. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who've made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Joe Biden knows the celebrations are over, and this is a country in crisis.
You don't want to be remembered this way. You always want to be remembered as something positive.
It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
There's no sign, publicly at least, of either side being willing to give ground. How do you reassure the public that all of these mistakes wouldn't be made again? I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
The press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
There's a feeling amongst some commentators that it's not the most respectful timing.
I think there's a word for it, fake news.
I mean, it's wah, wah, wah from Harriet. Delving deeper into the stories with different perspectives on tomorrow's headlines.
We really haven't seen the government getting round the table and negotiating. There are no easy answers to those questions.
The press preview delivering you tomorrow's news tonight on Sky News.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Welcome back. A bit of breaking news to bring you. We've just learned that a man has died after getting caught in fast-flowing floodwater in Shropshire today. That's according to West Mercia Police. More on that when we have it. And more breaking news. The Prime Minister is on his way back from the Middle East. Before he left, Rishi Sunak spoke to reporters in Cairo. Here's what he said.
I've been to 3 different countries and met 6 different leaders, including Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas, to discuss the situation in Israel and Gaza. This is a region in mourning, so first and foremost I wanted to express my condolences to all those affected. We've also made good progress on tangible areas like ensuring access for humanitarian aid to those who need it. But most importantly, in a situation like this, it's important to intensify dialogue because we all have a shared interest in peace and stability in this region. Well, when this crisis unfolded, one thing we have prioritised consistently is getting the Rafah crossing opening. It's been a feature of all my conversations, and I'm very pleased that that will now imminently happen. we announced an increase in our funding for humanitarian aid into the region. And when I met with President Sisi earlier today, he and I had a good discussion about how the UK can provide practical assistance on the ground to ensure the sustainability of that aid through the crossing to the people who need it.
Well, also during your meeting here, President Sisi rejected proposals to relocate Palestinians to Sinai. What's the UK stand on relocating Palestinians?
Well, the UK has been a long-standing, significant contributor to aid for the Palestinian people, particularly through the United Nations, and that funding helps support 5.8 million refugees, Palestinian refugees, every year. The immediate priority right now, though, is to get humanitarian aid to the people who need it in Gaza. That's why we've increased our funding and are providing practical support on the ground in cooperation with others to do that. And longer term, I think we all share a vision of a future where Palestinian people can live with dignity, with freedom and security, and we need to work hard to make that happen.
Well, speaking of bombing of an Ahli hospital in Gaza, a significant incident, the UN called for an international investigation. Will the UK back that international investigation?
Well, it's important to remember what happened here is a situation where we need to take the time to establish the facts, and we mourn every innocent life that has been lost, people of every faith, every nationality in this crisis. In this situation, it's right that we take the time to establish the facts. I have asked our chair of our intelligence committee in the UK to conduct a review of the evidence, establish what's happened, and they are doing that work, and it's important that we give them the time to do so.
Finally, a domestic question. How would you feel losing 2 by-election overnight in places that's safe to your party?
Yeah, they're obviously disappointing results, and not least because our candidates, Festus and Andrew, work very hard, and I know they'll continue to be great local champions in their communities. It's important to remember the context. Midterm by-elections are always difficult for incumbent governments, and of course there are also local factors at play here. I'm committed to delivering on the priorities of the British people. That's why we're going to keep on with halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing debt, cutting waiting lists and stopping the votes. But also over the past month, I've set out some long-term decisions that will change our country for the better. A new approach to net zero, which will save families thousands of pounds, ensuring that we take a different approach to HS2, investing £36 billion in hundreds of other transport projects around the country that will benefit people faster, or ensuring that an entire generation of our young children can grow up without smoking. Those are the type of decisions that I'm making for our country. That's the change that we're going to bring, and I'm committed to delivering for the British people.
China today announced it was restricting exports of a key material used in the batteries that power electric vehicles in what's being seen as retaliation against US-led restrictions on technology sales to Chinese companies. Beijing said it would be requiring export permits for 3 grades of graphite in what it said was a move to protect national security. Well, China's the world's biggest producer and export of graphite, top buyers of which include Japan, South Korea and the United States. Joining me now is Adam Forsyth, Head of Research at Longspur Capital. Adam, welcome to you. Is this just a bit of tit for tat following the US chip restrictions?
It would seem to be so. I mean, the Ministry of Commerce previously put some restrictions or export controls, to use the right phrase, on some of the rare earth metals, so gallium and germanium. And that had an impact on the market, obviously. But about a month later, we saw exports re-emerging. So it's not necessarily a complete block. But it does appear to be, it's clearly something that has been aimed at I think the ongoing dispute between the two countries on materials.
What is this going to mean for battery and for electric vehicle manufacturers?
Well, graphite's a key component for lithium-ion batteries. It's the anode in the battery. China produces about 90% of the synthetic graphite in the world and about 60% of the natural graphite. And there are restrictions on 3 of the major grades of synthetic and on natural. So it will have an impact. I think the main thing that's going to happen is that it raises awareness of the need for local sourcing. We've been seeing moves in that direction both in Europe and America, but I think this puts a greater emphasis on it. It's not just the need for security of supply, but also the emissions embedded within graphite, particularly within natural graphite, vary from mine to mine, and some of the more local sourcing that you would get in Europe, especially, could have very low emissions, which again, creates, I think, demand for local sourcing in itself.
You've kind of preempted my next question, Adam, which is going to be how easy is it going to be for customers to diversify away from Chinese supplies?
Well, given the scale, difficult, because, as I say, 90% of synthetic graphite is coming out of China, and it does take time to develop further resources. But it's happening, and I think this gives it greater emphasis.
Adam, graphite prices have fallen 30% this year. I mean, there is a view that China flooded the market early this year with cheap synthetic graphite.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been happening. I think I think this will obviously help prices. I think we saw that again with the other rare earth metals. We saw pricing moving back. You're often talking the differences between two very large numbers, and demand itself is I'm not going to say slow, but it's growing from a low point. We've still got a number of major battery manufacturers still in development, in Europe certainly. So yeah, pricing moves because of those and can move quite a lot. But I think we have had a decline. You're absolutely right in that. I would expect that to be at least slowing, if not reversing on this news.
Okay, Adam, we have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, European stocks have posted their worst weekly losses in 3 months this afternoon. A surge in government bond yields and ongoing uncertainty in the Middle East continue to weigh on sentiment. The DAX in Germany and the CAC 40 in Paris both hit their lowest level since the end of March today, while the SMI in Zurich fell to a level it last saw a year ago. Among individual features, L'Oréal fell by more than 1% in Paris on disappointing quarterly sales. Well, here in London, it's a similar position in the FTSE 100, off just over 1.25% in a broad-based sell-off. The biggest faller in percentage terms is Anglo-American, the miner. That's on weaker copper prices, while IHG is off on that trading update. There are a few gainers to mention, but Endeavour Mining is up on the back of a rise in the price of gold, while the healthcare equipment supplier Convatec, which you can see on the screen, that's up 3.5%. That's on direct buying. Outside the FTSE, well, the mid 250 has fallen to its lowest level in a year. There are some gainers around, though, and Holland and Wolff is one of them. The shipbuilder's up 13% after winning a £61 million contract to upgrade the Sea Rose floating production, storage and offloading vessel. Over on Wall Street, all the main indices are in negative territory. I can tell you right now that the Dow Jones is off 0.5%, the S&P 500 is off 1%, and the Nasdaq, as you can see there, is off 1.5%. On the foreign exchange markets, well, I mentioned earlier on, it's fairly unchanged there for the pound and the euro and the dollar. They're all trading in a tight band this afternoon. Meanwhile, the oil price is poised for its second weekly gain. A barrel of Brent crude will currently cost you $93.29 a barrel. That's up a little under 1%. Joining me this afternoon, George Ligarius, Chief Economist at Mazars Wealth Management. George, good to see you again this afternoon. I mean, it is us. We were all talking last week. It's all about bond yields just now.
Yes, it is all about bond yields. It is all about the long end of the curve. And I understand it. I understand that people see the yield, they have forgotten what yield looks like, and they keep buying. But I think, honestly, that the people need to remember, investors need to remember that the Fed has lost control of the long end of the yield curve. Not lost, it has yielded control of the long end of the yield curve. And that's very important, because people buying and who think, okay, something's going to happen and yields are going to drop again, I'm going to make a capital gain, they should be forewarned. If you're buying for the yield, that's fine. The yield is there, you're going to get it, and chances are you won't see a default. But if you're buying to get the capital gain, generally that's not what bonds are for. And right now, you could get a yield of 3%, but you could get a yield of 7%.
George, what about the oil price? I mean, we're not as high as we were at the end of September, but we're heading in that direction. How nervous should people be about this unleashing bout of inflation?
So the thing is that this is event-driven, right? And it's all a question of how far will the situation in the Middle East escalate. If it starts drawing other countries in, people should be very worried. And, I've been thinking a lot about this. We have no idea how this is going to play out. So what investors do, they're taking some bets here and there. But generally speaking, they've been patient to see how it plays out. You cannot bet on a very positive or a very negative event either. But make no mistake, everybody's with their hand on the trigger. And I think that's the key point. You could see oil prices escalate. You could see bond yields going down very quickly. You could see equity prices going down very quickly if something really erupts in the Middle East.
George, what about Argentina? We've got an election there this Sunday. A populist candidate won the primaries. Is this a markets event?
Well, I think not a general market event, because Argentina is known to have problems in its economy. It's had it in the past many times. It's currently facing 138-ish inflation. This is an unsustainable economy. And yes, you have the populist candidate who says that he wants to dollarize somehow the whole economy. And by the way, that's a very difficult project. And there is a good chance that he will get elected. Look, on one hand, desperation breeds innovation, and that has happened in history. On the other hand, sometimes some decisions are very bad. In the 1600s...
OK, George, I'm so sorry we're out of time. Got to leave it there. Good to see you as ever. Thank you. That's it from me. Up next, Mark Austin and Kamali Melbourne with the News Hour. Mark, of course, in Jerusalem. Do stay tuned. Cheerio.